Welcome back to Cast Me to Hell with me, Seb.
And me, Robbie.
And this week, our episode 30, Big 3-0.
Big 3-0. Which you are nearly soon, aren't you?
I am. It's only a couple of weeks until my Big 3-0.
Yeah.
We are looking at the best horror scenes not in horror films.
So this is a bit of an interesting one because it's a bit of a trip down memory lane, like a lot of our top 5 kind of are. So when I was doing this, there were quite a few of them that came to mind straight away, and a lot of them were films that I did watch when I was young. One of them was a film that I've watched recently, and I completely forgot about it. And then when watching it back, I remembered the scene and being terrified of it, so I stuck that on the list. So it's a bit of a walk down memory lane.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people it will be, because it's strange that this whole the best horror scenes not in horror films, but when I really started thinking of it, it's amazing how many in my head are in children's films.
Yeah.
Those kind of films are kind of where it's a breeding ground of, it's really where you don't expect to be scared as a child's film, but almost the best children films are almost the ones where you did have a scene that was kind of creepy or freaky, or it kind of really played to adults.
Yeah.
Those are the ones that kind of made it really interesting. So there are a few of those on my list, a couple of ones that were childhood love films, but there's also a little bit of a freaky scene in there that was just always what the fuck is going on? Why is this here? What are you doing to children?
Mine range from kind of action, sci-fi, and all the way up to even comedy, believe it or not.
Comedy.
And I think there's definitely got to be one that I think we have crossover. If you've listened to any of our top 5s, we occasionally do have a little crossover, don't we? And I guess this is my chance to yet again plug the show. So if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, and you can go and check out our back catalogue of top 5s. Who wants to start this time?
I think. Shall I start this time?
I think
you started last time, so we'll go from there with our little interesting lists.
Yeah.
Okay. So my first choice, I'm going to start with the kids' films. They're not all kids' films, my choices, but this one is a children's scene, and I do think it's one that kind of really, with a lot of kids, it kind of it stayed within them, in their mindset when they were a child, for some of them at least, and that's from Toy Story.
Okay, I think I know where you're going.
Yeah. So to be fair, there's a reason that Toy Story is so well renowned, not just because it's a fun, well animated, and smart script. It's because it has some darker scenes in it, some ideas. The whole series has ideas about toys that go deeper than just, this is just a film about toys. You know what I mean? And there are several scenes, especially involving the villainous character in the first one, which is Sid.
Yeah.
The boy who likes to blow up toys, as probably lots of you probably did. Lots of you were probably Sid without thinking about it.
A lot more of us, probably more than we realise.
Yeah, at least when you get to that age, it goes from being toys to, how can I destroy you now?
Or I had a really cool Green Goblin toy, and if I'd have
Defoe,
the Goblin, it wouldn't be past me to try and, if it wasn't so cool, to try and create my own toys, mixing them together, So
back in the day, I'm sure they're even as awesome now, but they don't never seem as awesome as when you're a kid. All the badass, that was the first Spider-Man film I had. I had one of those Defoe where he moved and you had a glider and you could move him around on it. Spider-Man where Tobey Maguire will burst a bit, broken in bits, where he's got beaten to hell from that film. There were even things I remember a bit as a kid, having toys. There used to be these weird Goosebumps ones I used to get, where it was basically a bag of goo.
Yeah.
And out of it made you believe that you were creating them, because you had to add something to the bag of goo, and then it would kind of form, and you think you were forming the parts, and you'd have to put together the creature inside. I don't know why. It always seemed like it was there's nothing there. Oh my God. Then when we add the water, it becomes a toy. No, it was in there somehow, but it was just I remember it as, there was definitely no toy in there before, and now there is.
It was probably one of those things just add water to.
Yeah.
You just didn't realise.
But it became a fully formed that you'd build. I mean, I could reminisce about the toys of the childhood all day long. Small Soldiers was another awesome film and awesome toy range.
I also had good bits of horror, and I don't know if that's going to be on your list.
That's not on my list,
there was elements
but
in
that
there.
is a very good. I mean, that's it. That's Joe Dante, isn't it? So.
Yeah.
Of course, it's got some good bits of like scary horror and like some references in there because it's Joe Dante.
Yeah.
I didn't even think of that one. It's a great one.
It is a great one.
Anyway, my part of my scene to get back on track with Toy Story, not just toys,
Yeah.
it is the scene where the broken toys in Sid's room come out from under the bed.
Oh.
Like I think this is in such a kids' film where we've got lots of like themes, like adult themes as well thrown in there. This is a scene where we've talked about this before. I was the kid who was really like scared by that many things, so I can't say that this was scary, but I recognized that this was weird.
Oh man, I was terrified.
As a strange like scene in a film. So I mean, Toy Story was like a revolutionary film anyway. Like Pixar, this is the first Pixar film, and it was revolutionary for its time. 1995, but it's more that kind of in that scene. It's that creepy that you've got such a kind of. I was about to say closeted, which was not the right word I wanted for Woody.
Definitely not.
Not closeted Woody.
No.
More, they're almost like recluse-like because they've never really seen the outside world that much, kind of thing. They're almost like in this little bubble.
Yeah.
And this is like when it fully like breaks for Woody, when he just thinks they've seen it and they think that the toys in the scene, which is like cannibalistic.
Yeah.
When he sees earlier and he sees them drag this broken toy out, and they think that basically he almost thinks, and it does play up themes of like toy cannibalism, that they're eating the toys or they're like literally ripping it apart for a reason. So when he sees them all coming out, I think the one that stands out the most is the metal leg spider boy with the head of the doll that's all the hair's been shaved off and one eye's kind of drooping down.
Yeah.
And it comes out click clack click clack click clack, and it's just that plays up on that spider, but it's like spider with a human baby head, and it's like what the fuck?
It's almost like an introduction to body horror, isn't
it?
You know? And so it was 1995. You'd have been 4, I would have been 3. And I don't think I watched it at age 3, but I definitely watched it slightly older than that, maybe.
I mean, yeah.
And yeah, it was just horrifying. You know? There's a muscle man with a dolphin head or something like that, and there's a muscle man with a weird head,
like
as
a praying mantis kind of one. And,
maybe it's got a praying mantis head.
There's one who's just dragging himself along, like all of his legs are missing, but he's just got one arm, and and then there are some like the we get later on a little bit, but we get some of the army soldiers who've got like nails through them, so they're just like deformed, and it looks really like
and melted as well.
Yeah, and melted, and like even though it's just toys, it's like, well, we're following toys, normal toys, and they're looking at this like, you're like, what the fuck? If this was like adapted into a human form or something like that, you would be freaked as fuck, like out from the bed, creep all of your worst nightmares.
Well,
kind of thing.
The toys are sentient, aren't they? They're aware, and it's about them living this life, which you naturally you assume is kind of is all playful and is all, joyful, and in actuality, like there are people who are like Sid, who definitely did that. Yeah, I remember being terrified.
I mean, actually, I would say people, my brother did that to loads of my toys. I used to find them freaking burnt and crisped, and I had like the toys from Godzilla.
Yes.
The Roland Emmerich Godzilla, the Matthew Broderick one. And I had like a little Broderick, like who, I don't know why he was the action star. The idea that I played with little Matthew Broderick.
Yeah.
And that doesn't sound wrong.
No, it doesn't.
That's our new soundbite for our show.
I played with little Matthew.
Oh god, that's going to take us. It's like me thinking of the Toy Story when people do those theories about what happened when they were sentient when Andy was a teenager. Like, what did they see?
Yeah.
But I didn't want to get back to whacking it again.
Let's go
all of our episodes. But the thing with actually Toy Story, so yeah, I've lived through that. My toys are getting fucking like looking at it going like cigarette burns in my toys, and they've just been exploded off the roof. But the other thing for me as a trip down memory lane is Toy Story is the first film that I saw as a child in the cinema.
Oh wow.
So, it's one of the few things that I actually have. You have like you remember barely anything from, but there's one thing that I remember is being sat watching a screen and seeing the opening with the blue clouds.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing that on a screen, and it's one of those things like, like when you're that young at our age, you basically just, the most I get out of that memories of that age are basically just like little flashes of images occasionally, like, your trauma comes up of what happened to me.
And you see the fucking deformed figures, toys, yeah.
Yeah. So for me, and I think for a generation of children, that was a scene that just kind of seared in their brain for a little while. And we'll see where we go with this list, but there's so many of these kind of children's ones that we could definitely discuss.
Yeah. Well, my one isn't my first one, number 5, isn't quite to that level. It's definitely not a traumatic one, but it's a film that I really love. I was obsessed with it when it came out. You'll remember, and that is Predators, 2010.
Yeah.
And the scene that I always thought was really cool. I mean, I love the whole film. It's just to shut your mind off and chill. But it's the scene where Topher Grace's character is separated from the people, from the rest of them in the ship. Lawrence Fishburne's just tried to kill them all, and they've all escaped. And he is on his own in kind of a part of the ship which is completely dark, and he can't see anything, and he feels like he's being watched. And then he lights a flare and he throws it, and it just hits the floor, nothing. I think he lights another one, nothing. And then he lights one, he throws it, and it hits a predator, and it's there watching him invisibly. And it's not, it's not a particularly horrifying scene. It's not quite the childhood trauma of the creatures from Toy Story, but it was always one which stuck out to me as a little bit of horror, because Predators never, I mean, it's an action film. It's never really explored much of that kind of horror.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say this one you're like balancing the line a little bit. I'd say where some people would be saying that is like horror, but I agree, it's an action.
It's
sci-fi.
an action.
Like
sci-fi.
the first one, the Arnold one. Yes, there are like scenes of horror thing, but it's an action film.
It's an action film.
And Predators is pretty much that. It's probably more sci-fi than the original.
Yeah, the original Predators is just about muscles,
yeah,
one-liners, and just killing.
The scene in that film, I thought, when you said about Topher Grace, is the bit when they're in the hole and he like poisons.
He poisons
with his blade, his
Olivia,
little cut.
yeah,
and that scene I thought, only because it's like I guess it's like a bit of a twist. Like, you knew he was going to be a bad guy, really, because they were all basically some kind of bad guy. But it was that kind of sudden like movement. Like, I remember that bit being like quite, and he sees it from her like point of view, kind of thing, going comatose.
Yeah,
and that scene I thought was quite like, for like say Topher Grace, who basically most people knew as Eric Foreman.
Yeah,
like, that was quite a good like scene for him. Like especially after Eddie Brock, where like he was meant to play a villain and it didn't really go his way.
Yeah,
not really his fault.
But yeah, but that's the one for me, because I just thought it was such a visually cool scene, and it played with it dipped its toes in some horror,
Yeah.
And I think we needed a character getting stalked in that. So that's my number 5. It's only a little quickie.
Although I got that little quickie, but I gotta say though that we both share in the fact that for that Predator film, I can't not think of that film without thinking of. Although I do think it's probably the second best Predator film to me.
Yeah.
I like the second one for what it is. But it's not a great like Predator film. I just love Danny Glover. Danny Glover's like this badass. I love the city terrain though. I'd love it to return to that. Yeah. And also the latest one is I liked the latest one.
I liked it
right up until the end. When
like,
why the fuck are we doing Iron Man Predator, or like what the fuck's going on here?
And even
why did you do that?
The whole idea with them harvesting stuff.
It was literally like a failed idea because they wanted Arnold was meant to be in that box. But anyway, that's not my point. My point is the disappointment with that Predator film of the trailer ruining by having expectations that went beyond. Because there's that scene with Adrian Brody, isn't there, where he gets the 3 targets on him,
and then he gets hundreds,
in the trailer.
Not hundreds, maybe.
But his whole body is like covered in. I remember like literally. I think we were sat in the cinema when we saw that trailer together for the first time, and you went, "How the Like, what the
Yeah.
fuck? How is he going to get out of that? And then in the film, it was like one dot, like 1 3 dot, obviously.
Yeah.
And it was like, I remember that being such a disappointing. So I really like that. I really like that film, but I always have a slight tinge of disappointment.
But, and that was around the time that a couple of trailers were doing that one.
Yeah,
they were filming.
They were
stuff,
faking it like a little bit.
Yeah, we don't really get that much.
Which is fact. Like the only only nowadays the only ones Marvel films fake stuff a lot. Like they do that to throw people off and things like that. A lot of the scenes in like Infinity War, the trailer, a lot of it didn't happen. Like they had the Hulk, which he wasn't actually even in the film, that kind of thing. But which is probably a better tactic than just ruin it completely. Because we've also had ones the other way that just literally give the whole film away. Like who needed to see Batman versus Superman because you watched it in the trailer they did for it.
Yeah.
Right, back onto my number. Are we going? Have we gone down?
I go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What did I say? Did I say my number 1 or did I say my number 5?
I've
already got off the rails. Right, I'm just gonna call it 4. If I called it 5, then I'm wrong. I'm wrong in my own life. Actually, I guess the Spider-Man link comes here with little Eric Foreman.
Yeah,
with little Topher Grace, although it is not Spider-Man 3. It's actually Spider-Man 2. And it is the operation scene with Doc Ock.
That was on my list.
Is it on your list?
I knew that was the one we were going to
you see, I almost went, so I was originally actually going for my first one I put down. I did put down another Spider-Man one, strangely a good series for horror scenes. Not, obviously, we know why this one's good, because it's Sam Raimi's behind the camera, and he's so good. But originally, I actually had the Mysterio scene from the latest Spider-Man film from Far From Home. Yeah, that one because that one kind of has like zombie Iron Man out of the grave, and it's just such a trippy, creepy scene.
That's really cool.
So yeah, that one was also like really cool because the visuals, like that was like the best scene in the film was Mysterio just fucking with his brain, but it was like. I would imagine for any kid that was watching that scene, like, what the fuck is going on? Like, Iron Man just died in like the last film that was released, and now here he is as like a skeleton, like zombie version of him coming out of the ground. Like that would have been freaky as shit. I was like, fucking hell. But let's discuss Spider-Man 2, because Spider-Man 2 probably the greatest Spider-Man film they've made.
One of the best superhero films.
And I can't wait for the fact that we're getting Doc Ock again. Alfred Molina's coming back. But
I would honestly say that Doc Ock, I mean, this is only for me. Obviously, other people can have their own opinions, but
come at us.
I'm dropping a bomb. But everybody knows that I'm not overly into comic book films. Yeah. It's not really my vibe. I'll watch them, but they're not really my thing. But I think that Green Goblin was awesome as well. But I think that the only two actual really good comic book villains we've had since Doc Ock is Heath Ledger's Joker and Thanos. Other than that, I haven't really found one that I thought was awesome. But I just think the whole scene is just so beautiful. I mean, it's so Evil Dead, isn't it?
It is. It's so Evil Dead. This is why I loved it. The second it like popped into my brain, I was like, oh yes. I was trying to think of one in that kind of action superhero realm. I was like, there's got to be something. We've had a few scenes that are popping up, like a few more horror based like scenes, but that one, Raimi, where we follow the tentacles in the very same way we kind of follow that like the spirit in the Evil Dead when we follow it through the forest. It's so much like that scene where we're following it around the room with all the doctors, but it's just manic.
I mean, the first thing is that we know we're in for something because we have Alfred Molina lying on the bed and we have all the tentacles up and they're all covered in the kind of clinical draping thing and stuff like that. And then we have the doctor and he's spinning the saw blade, and then he hears something move and he looks and he sees one of the things holding the armor, the tentacle. He sees it move a little. And then he's like, oh, that's enough, and he goes back. And then you see the tentacle I watched this because I watched it just before we recorded. You see the tentacle in the other doctor's glasses reflecting. And then I think the worst bit of this scene for me, because I watched this in the cinema, If you listen to a previous episode, you know that my brother went before me, told me that Spider-Man kills Doc Ock with a rocket launcher. So I was expecting that, but I went in and this scene was terrifying. And the one thing that has always stuck in my head from it is it's about halfway into the scene, because we don't get any music as well in this scene, which is amazing. We just see pure
Yeah.
carnage. But it's when a woman is running and she gets grabbed by the leg, and then she gets dragged into the darkness.
And straight, yeah.
And you see her nails scraping.
Yeah.
You hear it. Oh.
Yeah, that's horrible. There's the bit with the little chainsaw bit,
Yeah.
and then it kind of in the shadow, you kind of see that it gets kind of pushed back on him. You get the guy that's pinned into the wall by one of them, just straight up pinned.
And it's all completely
and the one
bloodless.
on the face as well. Yeah. It's bloodless, but you wouldn't notice because it's all happening so fast.
Yeah.
The best shot for me is I love the point of view of the tentacle shots.
Yeah.
But the best one is that just one shot when you've got Alfred Molina laid out, then the tentacles are just like moving around like crazy, and everyone's just getting flung around. And you get like through the window and the glass and it's just manic. It's crazy, but it just works so well. It's like this scary, like this is what makes this is kind of what makes him a great. It's not just that it's Alfred Molina like is great as Doc Ock, but it's the fact that they create the tentacles that have their own life.
Yeah.
They literally respond to him. Which is a nice way that they've played up the version. Like the comics is not exactly like that, where in this version his mind is being taken over by it. Yeah, the inhibited chip. Which but it just works so perfectly to cause this kind of like two sides of his mind. Like he's trying to defeat them, but they are taking over. So it's really the evil comes from them, not from him himself, which is what worked in the first series of Spider-Man. Like every villain kind of had like an emotional arc, and they kind of tried to balance it out. Like William Dafoe's was a little bit more evil, like than straight up than Doc Ock was.
That's
because
Doc
Ock
formula.
was fine. The formula, back to form,
back to formula.
Whereas in the third one, they kind of took it too far by having to have, because they had to shove in that emotional resident. They had like Sandman, who looked cool but didn't really work because it felt like it was just a repeat of another. Okay, so he's the sad story.
Yeah,
and
he killed Uncle Ben. Oh, we hate.
Oh yeah. It's like what the fuck? Like, why did you need to check? We didn't need that twist. It's that kind of stuff that kind of bogged it down. But with Doc Ock, it was just it was the perfect balance of that. Like, it's not so much a sad story, a sob story. It's like you can tell he's fighting it, but he also wanted something greater for humanity.
Yeah.
And then it kind of screams out in these like tentacles, which are just terrifying.
Yeah.
Like they are like scary throughout kind of thing, but they are like such a threat.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's anything like, that's why he pretty much is the strongest villain that they've had because of that. Like,
well, it's the fact that sometimes you just have bad guys who are just bad guys, you know?
Yeah.
But I think the thing that is great about this version of Dr. Octopus is that he's so thorough in his convictions. He doesn't believe what he's doing is bad. He believes what he's doing is necessary for humanity.
Yeah.
Because he's trying to create like a unlimited energy source or something like that, isn't he? So
like
he's
a second son. Basically.
Yeah, so he's trying to save humanity, in his strange way. And that is why I think Thanos is so good. You have to think of like, well, if you can make anything, just make infinite resources.
Yeah.
So that's always the plot hole, I guess.
There's always that, but it's the idea that he's so thing that if we get rid of half of the universe, we survive. Like, there's a part of that where you kind of like, even where like you at home, like just on our normal little world, and look at the thing and go, well, there's like 7 billion odd people on this planet, and there's not enough resources to last this amount of time. Might be right.
He has those convictions, whereas all the other kind of, in my opinion, a lot of the other villains are just kind of like one note. But
that's what I mean. There's I'd say there are a few other ones that have kind of peeked through, but those probably are the strongest where we've just had that kind of commanding, not just the commanding performance behind it, but the reasoning behind it is like the best ones are ones when you kind of go a little bit like, yeah, I kind of
Yeah.
actually, I kind of slightly agree with the bad guy.
Yeah.
And then that's a weird like kind of position to be in.
Yeah.
But that's what makes it then
That's what
they're
makes it
even
great.
more like
A
scary.
compelling bad guy.
Like you want them to be defeated because you know ultimately it's wrong, but you kind of a little bit like, yeah, and then that makes you more interested in that villain as well. Like the worst ones are when they just tack on a villain.
Yeah.
Like he's just there for no reason. We have no idea what you are. Or the ones which basically you're like the anti-me.
Yeah.
So I don't need to do character development because you're anti that.
Yeah.
You're, like that's what Venom was. He was anti Spider-Man. They turned the Venom into basically dark suit Spider-Man when we had dark. Like that was what it was. That was why that was like just didn't work. Right. So we've just done a joint fourth then.
Yeah. Well, I'll go in with my backup fourth.
You've got a backup.
I've got a backup fourth because I remember the first time we did this. I think it might be the first in memoriam. We both had the same death, and then you ended up being short.
We went off
track.
I mean, I've got plenty of extras, so if
Yeah.
there was any problem with that anyway, I would have been like, yeah, here we go.
Yeah, I've only got one, but I can't imagine you're going to have any of the other ones I've got because you've already got Doc Ock surgery, which is the one I was 90% positive that we'd share. So my backup fourth, and that is the ring wraiths in the Prancing Pony. So
yeah,
I remember seeing Lord of the Rings when it first came out, which was around 2001, 2000 maybe.
Yeah, it was 2001.
Yeah, so I was about 9 years old, and I was loving it. Absolute class film, but the ring wraiths terrified me because there was just something about the whole get-up. About there was this. I hadn't read the books. Obviously, I didn't know a whole lot about them, but it was the whole idea of these kind of corrupted people, and I was always wondering what do they look like under the things? What is it? What's going on? They always terrified me, and I think you had some amazing bits leading up to it, and kind of showing how powerful and how ruthless the ring wraiths are.
Yeah.
When they're going to the Shire and they're trying to hunt down Frodo and the rest of the boys. There's the amazing scene where they're hidden under the under the branch or the root,
like
or
the mound of the tree, tree root kind of thing.
And then you have the ring wraith peering over them.
That's just a classic shot, isn't it?
Yeah.
That them peering over and not seeing them.
But then when they get to the Prancing Pony, and shit goes down because Merry and Pippin are just showing off, and the ring ends up going on him. And then we have Aragorn, who I'm sure they only ever call him Strider in this this film, or this one scene they call him Strider.
I think for most of it, I don't think it's until they do the whole one ring I will protect, the protect scene. It's not until then that they actually learn a little bit more of who he is, kind of thing. But most of the film is Strider.
So I was tempted to go for when Frodo's been stabbed and they have the fight.
Yeah.
But there was something about this scene where the ring wraiths instantly turn around and they instantly know where Frodo is, and then Aragorn makes them hide, and they go to the gate and they just crash the gate down, killing the person under there.
Yeah.
And then they the hobbits are hiding under the bed covers, and
there's because this bit takes place at night.
So
it's very dark, gloomy. I mean, I know that like just the hiding and like what's coming, because that's when they think that one of them's in the room and it turns out to be Aragorn, pulls away the shit like here.
Yeah.
And the also, and then it's that chase, isn't it, when they're running and who is it behind? Is it Merry and Pippin who were behind?
Probably
towards most likely. And then you've got them chasing, and there's that suspense. And I mean, it's Peter Jackson as well. So again, horror roots. I mean, I just think there is something like horror directors. A lot of them don't get the chance to do certain things, but when they do,
they're incredible.
They're incredible. Like especially like coming over to things like fantasy or superhero or any of those kind of ones. They've just got an eye for something that brings an extra element to it. Yeah. And I do think bringing this little bit of suspense and terror into it really helps these kind of films. It brings them to life. But that was obviously it was already in the text, but he kind of visually brought that to life in a way that was.
And suspense and terror just raises the stakes, And when you're dealing with something like Lord of the Rings, which is about, power and control and domination and all of that, you need those stakes to be high.
Yeah, you want to feel like Frodo's gonna die, even though like if you know it, then you know he's not. And at that age, actually, I didn't know it well enough to have any idea. I'd never read the Lord of the Rings when I saw the Fellowship of the Ring. In fact, I had no idea. I remember going to see it in the cinema, and I had no idea what the Lord of the Rings even was at 9 years old.
I knew my dad likes it.
I'd heard of The Hobbit, weirdly, the book of The Hobbit, because I had a book of The Hobbit on the shelf for like years, but I'd never heard of the Lord of the Rings.
Well, my dad was a massive nerd, so I knew about it.
Yeah.
But basically, again, because of the books. And I went to see this in the cinema with him when I was nine years old. The whole series does have a bits of horror. You know, you've got Shelob. Mordor's a pretty scary place in general.
Yeah.
You know, there's sprinklings of horror, but it's when they walk Gollum himself,
yeah.
When they walk into the bedroom, and you know, it's so muted that you just hear the steps and the clinking of the armor, and then you just hear like the breathing from one of the hobbits hiding, and then you hear the stabbing and just the repeatedness, and I don't know,
amazing suspense, isn't it?
Yeah,
in that scene, the tension, like, is just like, like what's happening.
And I think when you're a kid, you know, your bed is kind of your safe space.
Yeah.
You know, if you were scared, you would just hide under the covers. You know, so you have this idea that being in there makes you safe, and your natural thing to do is, if there was an intruder or something, hide under the bed.
Yeah.
And it just kind of shows that you wouldn't be safe. Like, I would be dead. The ring wraith would just kill me, man, ruthlessly. You know, and it just stuck with me.
No, well, it is. I mean, it's such a good scene. I mean, weirdly, that some people like might have found it in certain ways. You know, sometimes it's slow at first, but that's the first one I go, and that's the one that made me actually like the entire series of film in some weird way. For nostalgia, it probably is actually my favorite. There's something I like about that first one. That weird kind of, it's the beginning of the journey, and it's a bit slower at times, but it has these kind of peaks that you don't expect. And I know there's the action stuff. The Two Towers, yes, is like the action is absolutely amazing. I really love the first one. The third one's it's a great film, but also at the same time, I don't know why, I just never enjoyed it. I don't find I can rewatch that one as much for some reason.
Yeah, I find it.
It feels like it's like 10 different endings. It didn't feel as strong as the prior two to me. Like, it didn't feel like I got as much from it, even though it was the end of the story. I prefer the journey to the story's end.
I think naturally it's like Return of the Jedi as well. You know, it always seems to be that third part.
Yeah, which is weird because that's the one that won all the awards and stuff like that. But you're right about Two Towers. I mean, I could watch Legolas and Gimli fighting all day, fighting together all day.
Funnily enough, when I went on holiday with my friend OJ, we went to Turkey. We were about 15, 16, and we stayed in this villa, and you couldn't get any signal on the TV. The only thing there was a DVD copy of Two Towers. So we must have watched Two Towers every single day for about a week. But yeah, over to you, Monkey, for your next one.
That's awesome.
I love the way I just I've started calling everyone Monkey. all of my close friends Monkey. I don't know why.
Right. For my next one, it is a film that I've only actually watched in the last couple of years. But I was always told, you should definitely watch this film, and it's Deliverance.
Oh yeah,
yeah, and it's it's obvious which scene it's going to be. It's Squeal Like a Pig, and it's just this kind of like, the subtext of it is obviously a hard thing to watch anyway.
Yeah,
but I think the thing that kind of almost puts it into this kind of horror realm for me, and this kind of it's the horrible, like, uncomfortableness of it that I feel like you only get in horror most of the time. Yeah. That kind of, it's hard to watch this, but there's also something that's so scary about the idea that you could just be trapped by these people like this and forced to do, they're forced to do, in that whole, like, rape scene.
Oh, yeah, it's grim to watch, isn't it?
You know, it's so well acted. I mean, Warren Beatty's the one that gets gets it like a pig, but you know, and it's so weird because obviously it's Burt Reynolds as well, which is like I was like,
and that's the
because
thing.
it's so used to I feel like you're so used to the Burt Reynolds that people started to know, and the Smokey and the Bandit one, and
Yeah.
the lying with nothing but like
Yeah.
to cover his genitals on
Yeah.
a bearskin rug or across a thing. That's the one that Rob loves.
Yeah.
But,
that's the kind of Burt Reynolds you get used to.
The mustache and the banging Sally Fields. I
Yeah.
don't know. I don't know if that happens. I can't say that I've ever really watched Smoking the Bandit or Cannonball Run or any of those ones properly.
But that's the kind of thing that you expect from Burt Reynolds.
Yeah.
And Deliverance, you hear it as like, it's kind of it's just a strange film in itself. It's
not
hard to classify what
I think it is because it's not. I would say like because it's only really this scene, but it does have the setup of one of those that we've mentioned a lot recently, like the kind of a bunch of friends go out on a trip somewhere. We've got the descent or open water, or like people go out on a trip somewhere and it takes a horrible turn.
Yeah,
a lot of the film I say takes more. Not so much in action, but I'd put this more in kind of the thriller kind of zone than a horror because it's not.
Yeah.
It's not overly full of scary scenes, but this scene is brutal to watch.
Yeah.
And it's one of those, like, it's hard for people to revisit in that kind of way. I think and also, as we mentioned, Burt Reynolds, it is a case of, like, in this, he's a pretty, like, kind of, he almost seems like the kind of action guy.
Yeah,
he's like that, but he plays that really well. Because it is hard to forget that at some point he was deemed as like a very good actor.
Yeah,
we get those things in some people's career when it gets bogged down by like some of the more commercial roles they do instead of the more like smaller project like this. And of course, you'll never be able to get the whole squeal like a pig, the noises. And then with that film, you've also got the
it's kind of
the banjo going off.
It's a strange kind of,
and the boy, like the boy's like the most inbred looking boy you've ever seen. Like, he looks like if you added, you've got a horror film here. If you added a few extra horror elements, I mean, there's almost a bit of a like Texas Chainsaw that you could have added into this, and you've got yourself a horror film. You know what I mean? I feel like this film is a few steps away from that because it is basically people hunting people down, but it almost takes a little bit closer to more of an actiony kind of vibe towards the end, that kind of like battling for their lives. But it's this one where it's kind of like, I don't think it's a horror, but because it's not. It would be much more drama thriller because it's just not got that atmosphere. But this one scene just suddenly kicks in and you're like, shit, what is this film? Like, if you were watching it and had no idea what this film was, it takes a turn that you were like not expecting.
No, if you told me Burt Reynolds and Warren Beatty in a film, I'd be thinking, okay, and you told me it was going to be like, it's about them going canoeing or something. Yeah. I'm going to be like, so this is kind of like a lost, without a paddle kind of comedy.
And that's the thing, like, Burt Reynolds has got that whole like bomber, like this kind of like bomber jacket kind of with his arms and muscles kind of showing, and it does not look like a film where like anything like this is going to happen to them like at the beginning, except for some weird, like, obviously the people around them are very strange in their little village and stuff. But it, like, as I said, I only watched it for the first time a few years ago, but I thought it was a great film. I really enjoyed it, but that scene did just like stick with me, like, oh shit, that is brutal.
That one caught me off guard as well. I will give you props for that. That left me a bit stunned. So I think my number one.
I've got a mix. As I said, I got a mixture of like. I was trying not to just hone it down just to one kind of genre.
My top one will get you, I think. So my next one is so this would be my number 3 if I'm correct. And it is. I mean, some people can argue that this is a horror film, but I don't believe it is. It falls more into action and sci-fi, definitely, for me. And that is the opening of Terminator.
Oh, yeah, I want him. This is action, sci-fi. Yeah. Like, I get the first one is a bit more of a chase.
Yeah.
This is the first Terminator, yeah?
First Terminator.
Obviously, the sequel is 100% like one of the greatest action films ever made, but the first one almost sometimes feels underrated in comparison to the sequel. The first one is...
I'll always prefer the first Terminator to the
Yeah.
second one. And I remember the first time I ever watched Terminator, I must have been about 6 or 7. So I was very young. I don't know. My dad let me watch it for some reason. He always says that no, I didn't let you watch these films, but I was like, you did.
Yeah.
You know, we were watching them back when we had a PS1. So
Yeah.
you know, and I remember being sat there with my dad, and we had the lights off. We had a massive clunky TV, and it was on VHS that that he'd recorded it on. So it was one of those cheap ones that you buy yourself and then just record things. So every time it came to the adverts, we would have to skip. But the opening, which it was just like a black screen showing some of the credits, and then it came into like a bright light, and then you see this machine, and it's just like a terrifying machine, and you see it as it starts rolling. It's on like a mountain of skulls.
Oh yeah.
And then it's all of these searchlights, and then you see the man running. I believe that it is Kyle Reese, but
Yeah.
you see him. You see this man being chased, and then it opens up with this dial. This like writing on screen, and it's about how from the fire.
Resistance of the
Where it says the machines rose from the fire, and it was just terrifying. And then after this, and it's only about 50 seconds, but I just remember being terrified. We then get, for me, the greatest theme tune for a film ever, the Terminator theme.
Oh yeah.
And then we get the sci-fi opening, and just the whole thing just terrified me.
Yeah.
The film terrified me the first time I watched it, and there were bits I was thinking maybe I could put the end of the film as it, when the truck blows up, and you're kind of like, oh, they've killed him, and then the actual, the exoskeleton rises up, because that is just, I mean, my thing with Terminator 2 is, yes, it's a great action film, but that's the problem, is it becomes too much. It's just too much action. And for me, the stakes aren't there, because what they should have done is they should have ended the series with a Terminator being sent back, because the whole idea that it's just a man who can't defeat this thing. He hasn't got any future weapons. He hasn't got any of this, or he's just got to keep her safe. It's just the stakes are just so much higher, And I just remember from seeing the opening of the film, just being terrified. It's been one of my favorite films ever since. But it's just got this such dark kind of gothic mixed with industrial kind of
I love
thing.
those are those parts of the film where they did that whole the futuristic, the mountain of skulls, the things like that. That's one scene that any number of them tried to recreate and never could do.
No.
And that was almost the part of the film where, in a way, if they ever had gone full sci-fi with it, I kind of wanted to see a war that looked like that, but they never created that on the screen again. They never created that war properly. I was like, the only thing I'd want to see if it was like I'm actually just seeing the future is I want to see that battle. I want to see the mountain of skulls. I want to see death upon death upon. I want to see it as like almost a high horror sci-fi, with the action, but the horror of war in that sci-fi way. I thought you were going to go the body horror of when the Terminator, which in some ways, yes, I know this part does look quite fake at times, but obviously for its time, and the fact that the first one was not made with anywhere near the budget of any of the other films are. The bit when he's in the bathroom and he's playing with his arm and his eye, and there's a cool body horror.
Awesome.
I mean, I didn't see the first. This is the thing. I remember Judgment Day because I'd seen Judgment Day like a million times from a young age.
Yeah.
The first Terminator I didn't see until I was in secondary school. So I didn't see the original, until I was in secondary school when I was showed it one night, and I think it was Andrew Jackson had showed it to me, and I was like,
shout out Andrew Jackson. Still play D&D with you.
And I was just I was just kind of drawn in by this oh shit, I didn't even realize this one existed. That one's definitely it's definitely the closest to horror out of any of the rest of the sequels. It's a robot chasing a thing, but it is, again, it kind of falls in that kind of blurred lines between where does it fall? Is this just a sci-fi? Because sci-fi itself has horror elements to it, just generally, because we bring those in, or fantasy, or any of them. They all have horrors. That's why it's kind of a fluid thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's a good choice. Now,
number 2 for the Eat Man.
My number 2. See, we're right about the numbers throwing me off because now I'm like, wait, is that my number 2? Is that my number 3?
No, because you started, so you're number 2.
Okay, so I'm literally trying to remember what my last film I just covered was because I'm now
Welcome
thinking...
to.
Oh, Deliverance. Yeah.
Welcome
I'd
to
already
Cast Me
forgot
to
about
Hell,
Deliverance.
unedited.
Yeah, exactly. I'd already forgot about Deliverance. So everyone's screaming, "Oh, you just did Deliverance!"
Yeah.
No, I forgot about Deliverance within seconds. You see, now this is now me in a kind of situation where actually I've literally just, as we were talking about one, I've decided on a completely new one, and I prefer it to what I'm looking at.
Do it.
Because again, it's got background in horror, but it's not a horror film.
Okay.
It's The Green Mile.
Oh.
This scene just popped into my head, and I was like, I don't think any film has ever scarred me as much as this scene in the film. And I'm betting you can probably guess the scene in the film in The Green Mile. That's really... Or maybe you don't. Maybe you don't know the film that well.
The only thing I'm guessing is John Coffey's death.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. There is John Coffey. I was about to say the wrong thing. I was mixing up names in my head then. Yeah, it is. It's that scene. It's the without the wet sponge scene, and it is. Yeah. It popped when we were talking about one a second ago. It just literally came into my head, and I was like, actually, you know what? I don't think I can think of a film where literally a scene where I struggle to watch a scene as much as I struggle to watch that. And I have watched it again.
Yeah.
But that is a scene where literally like one of those ones where I just don't want to watch.
I've only watched the film once.
Because it's violent and it's horrible and it's like terrifying. And I know it's Stephen King, obviously. So we know he's good.
Yeah.
That's terrifying.
He's one of the masters.
You know, he really is. And this is an amazing adaptation. You know, Frank Darabont, you know, who also did the Shawshank Redemption and The Mist. I mean, the dude is like, I wish like he had control over more Stephen King films because he's amazing at making Stephen King films into great adaptations. Because we very much know that the Shawshank Redemption that we love was only way shorter, and he actually made it into something better than it even was originally. But The Green Mile, again, although it almost has some more supernatural elements to it in the story. It's definitely, it's in no way a horror. It's a drama.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, it's a drama with some supernatural elements. But this scene is just, I mean, it's so brutal. And the last time I watched it, so I've told you before about us doing like this top 100 films of all time, and Green Mile was on that list. So I rewatched it recently, and I forgot how long it actually lingers on this death.
Yeah.
So when I'm blanking on the name of he's a complete asshole. The
I can't remember the name,
and I can't remember his name. The guy himself looks like smarmy and like
he does.
Like, he looks a lot like thinking of like Lord of the Rings. He looks a bit like Brad Dourif, but as the guy Wormtongue,
as Mr. Wormtongue, yeah,
Mr. Wormtongue.
But he plays the.
I mean, there's so many, like, I mean, weirdly enough, like Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks, although very good in this film, is almost a background watcher of this film. He's not actually, for who he is, he's not actually like front. He's not right in the front. Obviously, you're looking at he's showing me the list of the names here. Sam Rockwell and Barry Prepper and such a good cast. Michael Clarke Duncan's amazing.
Oh, Michael Clarke, big guy.
Forgetting, I just touched the screen. Forgetting yours is a touch screen.
So Doug Hutchinson, is it? Yes, it is because he plays Victor Toombs on the X-Files. I always remember Victor Toombs as terrifying.
So Doug Hutchinson, but he's just like the second you see him, it is that classic like story character of he's the son of a warden or something like that. So he's the friend of the son of a warden. He automatically gets the job just because he doesn't even want the job. He just wants to do it so he can do something else. Yeah. So he doesn't give two shits about these people, and he gets a kick out of making their life hell.
Yeah.
We obviously get the like another like hard scene to watch in it is when they kill when he kills the mouse.
Yeah.
I said mice, that's plural. But Michael Clarke Duncan's amazing character brings the mouse out to it. So that scene gets better, but there's no bringing John Coffey back to life in the way he is. And it's the case of he keeps saying, this asshole keeps saying that he wants to be the one to do it. He wants to be the one to be more involved with it. And they give him a chance. And how does he respond? Just because John Coffey in one scene gets a little bit of a leg up on him, he decides to take it out in this way by when he's asked has he put the wet sponge on his head, he hasn't. He's just put a dry sponge with the electric going through it. And it plays out so slowly where we just have this depth where he just starts shaking, but straight away smoke starts appearing. And but because they say because they've started it, we can't, even by the time we turn it off, it's still going to be pulsating into him. And it still takes them longer than it feels like it should for them to turn it off, because they don't seem to think, they think this something else is happening before they think, oh shit, what's that? And it's just that he has the bag over his head, but it starts burning through the bag.
I thought he didn't have the bag on.
Does he not? Oh yeah, he says don't put the bag. Oh yeah,
I don't want to be in the dark.
He doesn't have the bag. I don't want to be in the dark. Of course he does.
It's heartbreaking.
It is heartbreaking because and then
John Coffey's an innocent. He's innocent, and it's this.
Yeah, well, he's got you kind of get it's made clear that he is in jail, but he's in jail like a lot of people at that time who had who were had a disability, and yet they treated that as a criminal kind of thing, because they didn't understand. He didn't understand half the things they were doing,
and he was black as well, man. So that's the double whammy. They've got a. It was a time because it's set during the 50s, isn't it?
Yeah,
and there's the whole kind of the racial side of the story where is that he's been accused of killing two little white girls, isn't it? And obviously, that is something that still takes place today, but happened a lot more back then.
I just realised I am talking. Earlier when I thought I got confused, I'm talking about the wrong character. So you're thinking of a different character than I'm thinking of. Yeah, so I'm thinking of Edward. I'm thinking of Edward Delacroix, and he's played by Michael Jeter, and he's the one that gets the dry sponge on his head.
It's been a long time since I've watched the film. So.
Yeah, so that makes sense. But I was thinking John Coffey's the Michael Clark Duncan character, but then I was like, no, maybe we are talking about the same character, and I got myself confused there. But you're right. To be fair, the Michael Clark Duncan is not an easy one to watch either, because he doesn't want to be in the dark. That's a horrible scene to watch. But this scene is almost horrific.
Oh yeah, I'm thinking of a completely different film.
Michael Clark Duncan does get taken to his death down the Green Mile, but he doesn't burst into this guy bursts into flames. Yeah,
but they don't put a wet sponge on Michael Clark Duncan either, do they? I can't remember.
Yeah, they do.
Okay,
he gets the full on electric death, but in that one you get the sparks where it's almost like something's fighting it, it doesn't want him to go. Whereas this guy is the guy that gets the dry sponge. The Edward, he gets and he literally. I thought he did. So he does have the bag on his head. And it literally starts burning through, but you start to see his burning flesh of his skin.
I need to rewatch it.
So I mean, it's a long film. It's 3 hours.
It's a tasty
film. It is a tasty one. But yeah. So here you go again, unedited. See, we've got a good track record in this one. But Edward Delacroix. He's such a nice. He's almost John Coffey's as we said, kind of has he's got some special needs, and so does this character. They both do. There's similarities between both. That's why they get along and they're treated so nicely with each other. But he just gets he's such a harmless little character, and it's just the fact, and he has this little mouse that he looks after. That's why John Coffey inherits him when he dies.
Very vaguely remembering.
But it's just the whole room gets filled with smoke. People start rushing out, and you're just left with this basically charred corpse.
Yeah,
and this is the scene. I don't like watching the John Coffey death either. It's a hard film to watch, but this scene is really just brutal and horrific. You're how could you do that to someone? You've just fried. They're basically getting electrocuted, but fried alive at the same time. So he's still living while his flesh is burning around him. He's still alive basically until they stop it, and you see that he's still going. It's horrible.
I'm gonna have to rewatch it. I haven't seen it for years.
Yes, I would say. I mean, I think that's the case. I hadn't watched it in such a long time, but I'd say to people out there, go and have a little rewatch of The Green Mile. It's a very good film.
Yeah. Now my number 2 is from the film that I've recently been watching. My friend Al told me about, because it's one of his favourite trilogies, and there is a new one coming out, and that is from The Matrix.
I have that on my list as well.
I wonder if it'll be the same one. Because so it came out in 1999, and I only ever watched the first one, and I didn't really get it because I was 7, but I thought it was really cool. And then the rest of it, I didn't watch the other 2 because I heard they weren't great, and I kind of, because of that, I wasn't really interested in watching it. And then I said to my friend Al, we were speaking about it, and he said, "Oh, about the Matrix," and we were talking about it, and it was good. And I was like, I'm going to rewatch it. I rewatched the first one, and it's incredible.
Oh yeah,
amazing film.
It's a proper sci-fi masterpiece.
Yeah, shout out to the Wachowski sisters. And then I've rewatched Matrix Reloaded, and I might watch Revolutions tonight. But this scene is, and this is the one that terrified me when I was young, and it's when Neo first gets picked up by Mr. Smith, and they take him into the like the the interrogation room, and they're talking to him, and he says, you can have 2 offers. You can help us to kind of find more, this Morpheus, and then after, we will allow you to wake up and forget that all of this has ever happened, or we can destroy you, basically. And Neo's getting a bit smarmy because he's that kind of edgy hacker dude that you got in the 1990s, and he goes, well, you can fuck off or something like that. And then they say, well, it's got to be, I think he says something like, it's hard to answer without a mouth. And then we go back, and Neo's mouth, and the CGI, he looks okay even now, but Neo's mouth starts to form over, and he starts to,
and he stretches it, and we get this skin pulling apart at the lips in the,
and then he runs back and he gets against the wall, and then they pull him, and they hold him, and then now this is something that my dad always used to do to me when I was young. He did sew my mouth shut, but he did something that because he was big in Doctor Who, and there was something called the ball worms in it.
Yeah.
Now I don't know what they are because I never watched it, and I don't care to watch it. But he would get his finger and he would like make it move like a worm, and then he'd go towards my belly button saying, "It's release the ball worms."
Yeah.
And the ball worms burrow through people, so it always terrified me. And I always get a bit weird when something's in my belly button.
Yeah.
Even now it feels weird. And they release, the agents release this weird mechanical robot bug thing, and it burrows inside of Neo, and
blood splatters out.
Splatters out.
We've got the exact. This is the exact same one. This is the scene that just like literally like you're saying about that, and I used to have the same thing. Like I think my dad used to do the same bloody thing to me. Little thing, but literally like this, and this is like my neck thing. Belly button and neck are the 2 fingers. Like don't fucking touch. Don't fucking touch. You try and mess around with it. Like no, like if Charlotte ever like tried to get like that, I was like, no, fuck off.
Yeah,
like
I'd have trusted you. I said no, go, be gone.
Don't touch my neck. Don't touch that. Like
and it's just such a horrifying moment, and
just the idea of something going in or coming out of your belly button like that is just like, it made me cringe to this day. Like this is why it was one of those that just stuck with me, because it literally did scar me for life. It literally made me never want, like, no, don't fucking touch.
Well, when I was watching it, I completely forgot about the scene, and watching it took me back to when we first watched it on, I believe, home video. I mean, if you've listened to any of our shows, then growing up with home videos and VHS stores around the corner, getting the Matrix and having the hype of it, was amazing. But then seeing this scene just terrified me, and I guess I must have buried it, because it's such a horrid scene.
Oh yeah, it is. I mean, I guess it's because it's not the part that you necessarily remember in the film.
Yeah.
Obviously, because there are so many iconic shots
moments
in this film.
You've got the first time he dodges,
and it's very near the beginning of the film before we enter any of the world of the Matrix or any of that kind of stuff, or however you interpret the Matrix, that is. But yeah, it's such a, and you do kind of forget that the film itself is quite actually like the greens and the those colors, and the way it kind of is. It is kind of like as if like early in the film it's very like they're kind of all trapped inside of this like boxed off world, and then the Matrix kind of opens up to a different.
Yeah.
It's got a weird kind of. The film itself has got a weird kind of way that it kind of goes through pacing wise. That it does kind of feel a bit claustrophobic at times, and a bit as it builds into this bigger world for Neo. I would say that, like you just said, I rewatched the whole trilogy again recently because Matrix again was on that list.
Yeah.
But it was just the first one that was on the list. But I wanted to watch the whole trilogy.
Yeah.
I honestly, like, although I knew that they're not great, and yes, no, they're not as good as the first one, but they're also some good sci-fi.
Yeah, but the thing I thought about Reloaded was it didn't quite have the same magic as the first one, and I think that's more because you had more CGI in it.
Oh yeah, there is the terrible, like, even at the time was not great CGI.
Yeah, Neo looks like a PS2.
Go around the pole, the PS2 go around the pole and hitting them.
But what I did love was you get this fusion of kind of industrial kind of horror, with the futuristic and that kind of industrial sci-fi thing, and the fact that loads of them are wearing trench coats and Rage Against the Machine's always.
The only thing I think about the like things like that is like, and with the special effects and stuff like that, is though the film had such big ambitions, and I think the problem is that with some shots still actually look absolutely amazing, and some shots just don't work. And I think, and this isn't uncommon for a big blockbuster to have some, because you've got to pick your battles. Which one's going to look amazing and which one's going to be. Sadly, that one thing we just talked about should have been one that looked stronger than it did. But they were so ambitious at the time that, like, I can't really fault them for the fact that they were trying to create something beyond its time a little bit.
Definitely.
You know what I mean?
And it is.
It's so many special effects shots in those films. And I know you haven't watched the last one, but the last one is just chock full of them. But there are some amazing giant action scenes that are just like, holy shit.
And that's the thing. It has definitely shaped a lot of cinema. If you're looking at, I know they might have been quite heavily influenced by Hard Boiled and stuff and those kind of films.
Yeah.
But you get a lot of the bullet time and that sort of stuff, but also the kind of fusion of this kind of action with martial arts. I forgot just how much martial arts was actually in it.
Oh yeah.
But you get it, and it's that kind of martial arts from the kind of late 90s, that kind of Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon style, where it's martial arts, but it's also a bit kind of bending the realms of what's possible. Obviously, because they can, but it's that sort of stuff. I think before we go on to our number ones, we should pop over to the social media lounge.
Yes, let's do that.
So obviously, if you follow us on Twitter or Instagram at CMTH Podcast, you know that we often put up what we're talking about in our episodes, and then we will kind of go through them and read out some of the people's choices. We are the people's champions. So, one that I would give a shout out to is our boy Philippe over in New Jersey, who runs Scary Friends, Scaring Friends. Definitely go and check them out. They've just started. They've just released the 4th episode, but they cover all sorts of films. I know we haven't quite gone over there yet, but they've covered some kind of Korean films and Spanish films. So I definitely go check them out. And his suggestion was Tim's death from Hot Fuzz. Do you remember?
Yeah, I would say that's a horror film.
I wouldn't say it's
an action film, but it's
an
a
action film. I'd say it's an action film.
Like, there's literally, like, the guy gets, like, his head imploded, someone gets their throat cut, and it's a guy that's pretty much dressed like almost Ghostface.
Yeah, but I would say it's more action.
It's a blend, but Edgar Wright makes, like, mixed together films, and I definitely, like, for me it's an action film, but it's also a horror film.
See, I've always included because it's the Cornetto trilogy, isn't it? So Shaun of the Dead for me was always horror comedy. Hot Fuzz was action comedy, and The World's End was sci-fi comedy. Yeah. So
I still feel like there's so many deaths in that film. It's like, to me, it's definitely like more of a horror comedy kind of thing, a horror action comedy that's like spliced together of several things than just. Whereas World's End, that's so much why World's End felt so weird, because the first two had such a kind of horror edge to them that the third one just felt like weirdly out
Yeah.
of place.
I mean, it looks like we may have to agree to disagree, my friend.
I mean, even look at you've got a shot of it right there. I mean, that is graphic horror.
Yeah, but it's in an action film.
Yeah, but how often do we have action films that have like major horror, like that kind of thing, or has a slasher killer that goes around like?
Yeah, I see.
You know what I mean? Like that's why that's why I like Hot Fuzz so much, because it's like a slasher film as well.
So we had two suggestions. So We Needed Roads podcast, another UK shout out, and Sounds Creepy podcast. They both suggested the same thing, which I actually put that I was about 90% sure you were going to mention, and it was the Kalima from Temple of Doom, the heart rip out, because that's got some heavy ones. Kalima, and then the classic when they open the what's it called? The Ark, and it melts them all. You know, that's so we had two Indiana Jones.
That was on mine, although I would say that I've got a bunch and I was literally just going down it. So you've made my option a lot easier to say my next one, because Raiders of the Lost Ark, that scene, the face melted scene, is like, although Kalimar is Raiders of the Lost Ark 1 is a better film, and also it's just such a like, it's just so like, what the fuck, like the film has got some of those elements, but as the first one, it like gave us that idea that this isn't just an action film. We can have these kind of creepy, and also because it's meant to be a film that's kind of open to like a lot of audiences. That's quite a weirdly graphic scene.
Is.
I mean, so is the Kalimar scene in that, but face melt off versus heart ripped out. I feel like face melt off is like more like weirdly like, what the fuck.
But then again, you can close your eyes, can't you? If you notice, you can close your eyes. You can't close your eyes and have your heart stopping.
Well, we know this whole thing. We also know the whole basically you take Indiana Jones out of the film and the whole film, everything still happens in the same order. So, like, you know what I mean? It's Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark. It could just be, and lots of people do call it Raiders of the Lost Ark, but it could literally just be Raiders of the Lost Ark, no Indiana Jones, and we still watch the Nazis go and kill themselves, basically.
Which is always
still a good film.
And this one, I wonder if you all have this, because I know Charlotte's really into Disney, isn't she? So you might watch a lot of them. But and this is from Scare Traducing, which is a Scottish-based podcast. Go and check them out. I believe they're Scottish-based. I'm not too sure. But well, they've got a Scottish flag and a Mexican flag in the thing, so it could be that one's Scottish, one's Mexican. Fusion, yeah. I'm trying to think of what kind of food that would be. It'd be like a haggis burrito.
Yeah, haggis tacos.
Haggis tacos.
And that's not racist.
No, it's not racist at all. And this is the Sleeping Beauty scene where she pricks her finger. And then it starts to go through that kind of weird trip, and then the demon woman shows her name. Yeah,
I mean that's a good one. I mean, I had Disney. I mean, I haven't put a Disney one on my list, but that's just because I couldn't actually choose, because Disney's got a bunch of ones with really scary, creepy.
Doesn't it?
I mean, Pinocchio with the island where they all turn into donkeys is weirdly dark.
I remember that freaking me out.
It's a really freaky dark scene. Bambi's mum
getting
like
shot.
That scene is quite really dark. The Hunchback of Notre Dame opens with a woman being killed and the guy basically saying, leave her to die in the streets and take her child.
I can't really remember the Hunchback.
Yeah, I mean it's actually really dark for an animation, but. And as we said before with like Toy Story, obviously Pixar, to be more specific for those people that are it's Pixar, not Disney. Yes, it is, but they picked up the same mantle as Disney by going, there's darkness in this film, and you know there are plenty of really dark scenes in these like films. Yeah, so Disney is a hunting ground for like some really dark scenes. Is that? I was waiting for another one. Like, who else is talking?
We had 4, but they're all good suggestions. And now over to you for your number 1.
Okay, my number 1. Okay, so this is me picking back and forth. You know me, I've always got some honorable mentions. I've always got like a bunch of ones that I just can never decide between, and it's like they're all like kind of equal footing with me. If anything, actually, before I say my number 1, I'm not going to say them before because in case you've got one. I don't want to ruin yours.
Yeah, we'll come back
for honorable mention at the end. But my number 1 choice is a film that I absolutely loved, and it is going back to childhood again. And it is Jumanji.
Oh,
And it is the scene when the floor turns to quicksand,
oh yeah.
and when Robin Williams gets stuck in the floor. But it's not just stuck in the floor. Obviously, as we find out, there's lots of like cool little like kind of dark moments in this film. You know, even just the backstory of him. That opening scene actually with him as a child when he gets sucked in is a hell of a creepy scene.
Yeah.
You've got the bats that come out of the fireplace as he's screaming and getting whirled around. You've got Sarah, the girl who's with him, kind of screaming her head off as she runs, and the door kind of closes behind her in some kind of weird, creepy, supernatural way.
Yeah.
And just the fact that he's then basically tells us that he's lived in the jungle for like 30 years by himself.
Yeah.
You know, it's just like, but you know that he's had like a pretty like weird, like dark life so far. Is kind of that. And the film has this kind of nice kind of dark. I think that's what I like about it so much, is that it actually has this kind of emotional story underneath it, this kind of dark depth of like these dark things that have kind of happened. Like the whole town is, since that's happened, has just gone into like ill repute kind of thing. It's the whole town is like pretty much like a lot of it's shut down. There's no real business there anymore.
I haven't watched Jumanji for years. I'm gonna have to rewatch it.
I mean, the new ones, obviously with the rock and stuff, they're great fun for what they are. But the original Jumanji it has this extra layer that those ones don't quite have. But I like them, but I like to think of them slightly as separate kind of types of films. But this one's just full of like so many creatures from the jungle, the Amazon, that are coming out of there.
I remember the spiders. Terrifying.
This is why this one's my scene, because it is. So as they're playing that, the floorboards that are on start to turn into this kind of quicksand. I mean, it looks really cool because the floorboards basically just stay the same. It kind of turns into an effect, and he starts to sink to the point where he's up to his neck, and then just his face.
Yeah.
And then that's when we roll the next one, and what's that? And then you just hear like click, 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 clacking all over the room. Ugh. And then this is when these spiders start to come out. They're kind of weird because they're almost like crabs, like that kind of like extra long kind of creepy looking thing, but they just start to crawl, and they crawl all over his face, and we even get this kind of drool stuff that starts coming down, and he's trying to breathe at the same time, and he's completely like stuck, and you'd like got like the sweat around his face, and he's like, he himself is kind of drooling because he's trying really hard. He even has a bit when he like has to spit the dice out of his mouth. And obviously the kids are so freaked out, but he's just stuck, he's trapped watching all of this happen around him, and there's nothing he can do while these spiders are kind of crawling all over him. And I mean, again, I'm not really a major, like, I'm not that bad with, I haven't got arachnophobia, I'm not that bad with spiders. But at the same time, I'm not scared of spiders, but there's no denying that when you walk into a room in the middle of the night and there's a giant freaking spider just like happens to be crawling down the wall next to you, you get a bit of a, oh shit.
Well,
look at you bastard.
Yeah, they're sneaky little bastards, aren't they?
Yeah, they are. So, you know, this kind of idea of it crawling over, I know for some people would have been absolute, oh my God, what the fuck, a spider crawling all over my face. I mean, there's that old, like, urban legend of the idea that, like, you swallow like, it's a large number as well. It was sort of like 1,000 spiders a year crawl in. 2. No, I swear, it's like, that's why I was like, that's not true.
That was back in the day when urban legends were like,
well, you can just look it up on Google.
No, you just talk to people, and it's like, oh my God! But now it's like
you just talk to people. Like now,
but it would be like you would tell me that there was 1,000, and then I'd go and tell somebody,
and it would just get bigger and bigger.
It would just get bigger and bigger, and it would get more believable, you know, because all of a sudden it's not like my friend told me. It's like, oh, I read this like science paper. And then it just becomes real, you know.
But still, even if it's just 2, the idea that in your every year 2 spiders just go in there and I go, like it's like, oh fuck, like what else is flying in my mouth?
Yeah, it's kind of it's horrid, man.
I'm being raped by a spider at night.
Not good.
But the whole they start having to like cut him out and stuff, and there's an extra kind of, you can see it on his face because practical effects. Robin Williams has literally been you can tell that he's literally been placed just from the way he's moving and stuff. Like he's struggling to move his face, even like he's struggling to move that, and he does get like they get stung, so it causes like a paralysis. So he's kind of starts to get like that, and it's just I think the practical effects adds a layer, and also the fact that Robin Williams was such a fantastic performer.
Yeah, he was. He was
that
brilliant.
you're just like, you're scared for him, but you feel the kind of claustrophobia that he probably feels just being trapped and stuck. You know,
Yeah.
and that's a horrible idea. That suddenly you're just going to be like, it's the idea of it's like the what is it what's the word for the people that can phase, like in like if it was a superpower, like phase through walls and things like that. Well, that's one word for it, but there is a specific word. But, like, you phase through walls.
Yeah.
But it's that idea when someone says, imagine if you could just walk through like everything like a ghost. You could just
Yeah.
phase through, like go that. But then there's that when someone goes, yeah, but imagine if you phase through a wall and got stuck in the middle of the wall.
Oh, yeah.
And you're trapped. Like, it's the same idea of like with the Descent when we were talking about being trapped in there. This is basically what it is. It's like that.
It's
oh
that
my God.
feeling of powerlessness.
Like, you are trapped. It's like being stuck in a coffin, buried under the ground, and you're just stuck.
Yeah,
like,
which I was always afraid of when I was young.
Yeah,
because I thought that's going to happen.
It's horrible. There's a great Ryan Reynolds film called Buried.
Yeah, Buried,
which is really cool. Like, which is its own kind of like, it's not a horror film, but it's horrible to watch.
It's very claustrophobic, isn't it?
Yeah, because the whole film's just him in a box.
Yeah,
you know. But it's like that idea is just, it's a horrible feeling, and I just think there are so many elements. This is what was great about 90s films, is that there was so many 90s films that had this weird, you know, films we could have added, or 80s films like you know, like Labyrinth,
yeah,
or Dark Crystal, like these weird puppets that are like, what the fuck are you? Like,
you look back at them, it's creepy,
like,
yeah.
horrible, like disgusting things, or even like TV where we're like Ren and Stimpy with their close-ups of the human body that just gave a generation OCD because of how grotesque, like they'd show all the bacteria on close-up of their face and stuff, like, what the fuck?
Yeah, it was
like,
kind of grim, wasn't it?
But yeah, in the 90s, we had so many of our children's film had like this weird, dark present underneath them. And I think that's probably why the 90s, like, children's films are like, they're not just our generation, but they're some of the greatest ever made, which we don't have enough of nowadays. There's not enough dark elements to the film. So.
They're a bit, I guess because it's now so much more expensive to do films. Yeah. I don't think they take as many chances, you know.
No, it's more, we're now seeing where those chances are now moving more to the ones that, not in cinema, but the ones on like streaming and stuff like that, might take more chances also to be a little bit more out there kind of thing.
Yeah, definitely.
You're number one.
Okay, now this is a scene that absolutely terrified me when I was young, and I showed it to Anna recently. Maybe, when did I see her last? A couple of days ago, and it's still terrified me. It still freaked me out. And this is a scene. If I'll tell you the film, we'll see if you can guess the scene. And it's from Ace Ventura in 1994.
Ace Ventura? Oh wow. Yeah, that one stumped me a bit, because literally I think Ace Ventura, I think him climbing out of a rhino's ass. No. Like sweating, like you're scared of him being sweating, like you'll one day wake up inside of a rhino's ass.
Inside of a rhino's asshole. That is actually When Nature Calls, the
is
follow-up.
It the sequel?
It's the sequel. So the first Ace Ventura, he is after a dolphin called, can't even fucking remember, Spoopy or something. I don't know what you call dolphins. Spoopy.
With
Spoopy with
Courtney Cox.
Courtney Cox. And he goes to this soiree, this kind of fancy dinner party, and he goes back behind this door that says "Do not enter," and he thinks, that's where they're keeping it, and he goes there, and it's a gigantic pool with black water, really dark water, and there's a walkway over it, and there's a bucket of fish.
Yeah.
So he thinks, I have found Spoopy, or whatever his name is. And it still fucking terrifies me. And it terrified me when I was young. And he climbs up, the ladder, and he starts walking along. And he's holding a fish, and calling its name, Spoopy, whatever it is. I'm just calling it Spoopy now. And you see these shots of looking up from the water at him. And then, very reminiscent of another famous shot in Jaws, is where he's holding it and he turns around to look, and a massive great white shark jumps out, and he falls in the water. And I just have this thing about water and being in darkness Even deep blue sea still freaks me out, man, because I'm just convinced. I used to go swimming, and whenever I had swimming lessons, I was convinced that sharks would come out of the little holes that would filter water out. I was
Yeah.
convinced sharks would come out of there, and at night, I was convinced that a shark would be in the pool. And I think it's because of this. I would always this scene just terrified me. If you haven't watched it, you can find it on YouTube, and it's just so well done. I mean, it gets a bit comical when the shark attacks him.
I was going to say, I do remember the scene, but I can't remember everything. I just remember it like thinking it was funny the way the shark jumps
Fucking
up. And
terrifying, man.
I guess to be like, this is what I mean. Like, but this is why it's subjective, isn't it? Like, certain people see it in certain ways. It depends on if it hits on the nerve, doesn't it? Like
Yeah,
fear.
it did for me, man.
Like like I'm guessing Jaws must have been a fucking
Jaws still terrifying.
Oh, yes, Jaws is still terrible. Jaws is awesome. It's by the way, Snowflake.
Snowflake.
I had to look it up because Spoopy or
Spoopy.
Spoopy.
That was relatively
Spoopy, Snowflake.
They both start with S.
Yeah, they do.
But yeah, that's mine. Honestly, if you can watch it, it's absolutely terrifying, and the film itself is decent. I mean, I tried to watch it again, but I just had no interest because I was like, I want to watch The Matrix. But this scene is just so terrifying, and I definitely recommend watching it. Do you want to go through a couple of the honourable mentions before we?
Yeah, we can do. I mean, obviously, before we came into this episode, there was a kind of like we said originally. We kind of said that this would be open, but we kind of decided to then close it back down because we came up with film ideas, and I had a few of the TV ones, but we kind of decided that in the future we'll come back episode. And we'll do a TV because there are so many good horror TV shows, obviously, but there are also really great horror scenes or horrific scenes or scary scenes or graphic scenes that appear in TV shows as well. Yeah. And there's some great ones out there. So we will return to this feature in the future. It will return. So a few of my little honourable mentions, the ones on the top of my head. This one is another children's film, which was my very close other one, and it's Matilda.
Oh yeah, Matilda was horrid.
Yeah, Matilda is like literally one of my favourite films of all time. I think Jumanji is as well. Yeah. It's a certain children's film crossover to. I pretty much just love that film. But Matilda, and the key scene, I was kind of going between two scenes. One is just the chokey.
Yeah, the
chokey is like, for a child is nails inside of a door being trapped all around it. There's no way you can lean back. You literally have to stand in position all the time for hours. You would lock them in there for hours.
Put them in the chokey.
Obviously, because it's a kid's film, there is a lightness played to it at times. But it literally, the idea that, okay, I'll put you in one for 8 hours. If you move, if you fall asleep, if you drop, you're going to land on nails in your skull, probably.
Yeah.
That's pretty, brutal. And it's also the fact that if you look on the wall, they have added details where someone's obviously, caught themselves or picked themselves up. There's, rusty parts to it. It's just, I mean, it's such a good performance for Miss Trunchbull, but it's just, it's a claustrophobic nightmare. Is. The other one is when she actually, because the Trunchbull is both played up, sometimes comical, but most of the time in this is quite a terrifying figure.
Yeah,
and it is when Matilda and Miss Honey sneak into her house.
Yeah, I can't remember.
And we have this kind of we have a scene where Miss Trunchbull comes home and she's going through, and Matilda's having to hide around the house, and it becomes quite a kind of where is she? Because even Matilda plays into the horror, the kind of a horror element where she uses the pictures of the dead family members to scare off Miss Trunchbull, towards the end, to kind of make her realise the wrong that she's been doing, chasing her through the house. So we have some nice way that she uses the supernatural gift to kind of play with Miss Trunchbull. That was one of mine, just because it pops into my head as one of my favourite. Another one was American History X, The Curb Stomp, which is just a brutal scene to watch. It's another one where you cringe and look away.
Yeah,
and you don't see it. But you do see the teeth against the curb, and you hear the noise.
That
noise is enough. The noise of the curb stomp is enough to make
still sends shudders down my spine.
Jesus, oh my god, that is horrible. Right, No Country for Old Men. I don't know. Have you seen?
Yeah,
But
seen it
Javier
once.
Bardem is his
Yeah,
own. He's his
Javier
own.
Bardem was awesome.
He's his own terrifying figure in that film.
Yeah,
It's just him. Like you can pick any scene, but the coin toss scene where he makes him choose is just suspenseful in the perfect way. You make a complete villain, but you make a horror figure almost. He could literally be chasing anyone.
It's
You'd be
great.
terrified of what could happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another one that I have is it's the never-ending story. Quagmire and the horse, when the horse gets stuck in it.
I saw that one. I couldn't decide whether that was more like an emotional scene than but there was something so horrible about it, and the fact that you see the death, I think is what makes it almost horrific. Is the fact all the way down until you get to that kind of point is just oh my.
Well, I watched it in reception, or no, year 3, I believe we watched it. They rolled in the old TV in the VHS. And it was just horrible watching it, you know. So I must have been about 8, 9 watching it, and it was just terrifying. And I guess it goes back to what you said in Jumanji. It's the feeling of powerlessness and the feeling that you know, if you were in that situation, you'd be shitting yourself. Naturally, because of that film, I always thought that I would find myself in quicksand a lot more than I have in real life, you know.
That scene really does have a horrible the way, because you don't expect, it's a kids film, you don't expect to see the horse literally to the point where it goes all the way under and you still see kind of bubbleness and you're like, oh my god, is it actually dead? Is he not coming back out? And the kid is crying, it's like screaming, and he's trying so hard to save him. That's what pushed it over the edge of, like, for me, I think, is that emotional barrier. Like, yes, it's horrible if you lose an animal in a film anyway, but this is where, when we literally get to hear the horrific sounds of its death, that it's like, oh my god, like, why is this in a kids' film? And I've rewatched Neverending Story, actually, like, recently. It was on at Christmas, and I watched it on TV. And I can't say, like, it's got some amazing imagery. I can't say I loved it. I weirdly found it a bit dull at times.
I can't.
But there are some amazing scenes in it. But yeah, that just popped in my head. I've seen that.
Give us one more before we wrap up.
Yeah, I think this is it. The last one actually that I only put in here was Saving Private Ryan.
Ooh, okay.
And although obviously there's the horrible claustrophobia of the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan, the D-Day on the beach kind of thing, which is just an amazing scene.
It's horrific.
But it's mainly actually Eddie Caribbean, who was one of the actors in the film. He gets a death which is really slow, where he gets a blade slowly pushed into him. And there's just something about the way it's such a slow shot. Like, he's fighting with this guy for ages, and you think he's got the upper hand, and then he just kind of fucks up. And you've also got the tension of the fact that there's a guy literally just on the steps, like just outside the door. Yeah. You're like, is he going to come in and save him? And he's screaming, and he gets the blade into his chest, and he's literally like screaming out in pain and terror. And that is, again, what pushes it over for me, is it's not just a death. Like, this is a war film. Loads of people have died. Like, it's not unexpected. But it's that kind of, it reminds me of old Chewie in Friday the 13th. That horrible, like, why is he dying? Why is a nice guy dying so slowly?
But I guess that's it. Like,
that's what creates the terror, though.
Yeah.
It's like,
well, death doesn't discriminate. And that's the kind of horrible thing about war, is that people do die. You know, people's sons and daughters die horrid deaths, and it's kind of, I guess you have this idea around deaths in films that they're kind of like throwaway, you know, how many henchmen does James Bond kill, all that kind of stuff, and they're henchmen so they're evil. And then when you look at war films, they ground it a lot more, you know, and it's that kind of thing, is that this is real stuff. I mean, World War II, we would have had family fight in it, you know, and it's that kind of, it brings it home in a strange way.
But obviously, that's the whole thing. And with war, it is a case of, we talk about horror, and obviously you do a war film and people say it's an action, but oh my god, the horrific nature of things you'd never see. Even in horror films, there's like things that are like unbelievably horrific. And a lot of war films don't even play into that as much as they possibly could, because if you've seen like images of history on like war grounds and stuff, it was a like horrific massacre, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was.
I mean, if you look at those pictures, they're worse than what you'd see in your standard horror film any day. Like, it's people torn apart, shrapnel ripping people through people. It's horrible. It's a horrible thought in history. There's a horrible idea, and that's just why that one also played into my mind.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this has been quite a fun little trip down memory lane, hasn't it? So
little thoughts and
yeah.
feelings.
So I guess if you've enjoyed the show, then you can find us on Twitter at CMTH Podcast and Instagram at CMTH Podcast. Come and let us know your favourite kind of horror scenes not in horror. Let us know what you thought about any of ours. And if you've enjoyed the show, as always, hit the subscribe button and leave us a lovely review. And we will be back next week.